Is simpler better? That's the question I want to answer in this review. Because the CampSnap Pro promises an elevated screen-free photography experience with a nostalgic twist. So I took it out to the town of Bayfield, Ontario, an historic beachside town that gave me the opportunity to test it out under 3 very different conditions. An evening sunset, a little nighttime street photography, and some daytime photography. And after testing this out for a couple of days, the thing that surprised me is that what makes this camera fun may also be its greatest weakness. And so let's start first with a bit of background and the product specifications. The original CampSnap camera was designed for kids going to summer camp. Seriously, the idea was that they could go screen-free and just focus on socializing, playing games, and exploring the outdoors. But this would still allow them to take lots of photos because they're using a digital as opposed to a disposable camera. However, it came with just an 8 megapixel sensor and a very basic flash. So to broaden out to the adult market, the CS Pro came out with an improved processor, a 16 megapixel sensor, and a true xenon flash, while still maintaining that screen-free digital experience. So the CS Pro is the version I tested for the purpose of this video. Out of the box, one thing I noticed was its all-plastic construction, though still fairly durable, about what you'd expect for a camera in this price range. Another thing that struck me was that the micro SD slot actually had a screw keeping the cover closed. I guess they're just super committed to that screen-free idea. They don't want you cheating and checking those photos on your laptop, you know. Though having said that, there is a USB cord you can use to download the photos without opening the SD slot. Last things to mention here is it's got the little battery counter to tell you how much charge you have left, as well as the shot counter showing how many shots you've taken. And even with the 4GB SD card that's included, you're going to get close to 800 to 1,000 photos because each photo is only 16 megapixels. And then we got the 4-filter dial, which are going to give your photos different kind of looks depending on which one that you select. So with that, let's talk about the sunset shot at golden hour. And almost immediately I encountered something I didn't anticipate. And that's that being screen-free wasn't necessarily an advantage in this case. Because of course you shouldn't look directly at the sunset when you're taking photos because that can hurt your eyes. Which is why having a view screen to look through in these cases can be very helpful. Nevertheless, I did manage to get some photos of the sunset, including this one here, which I kind of liked. As well as this one here, which we could compare to one shot on my iPhone. As you can see, it's 2 very different takes on the same scene. I thought it was interesting how the CampSnap filter really cleaned up the atmosphere from the wildfire smoke, whereas the iPhone image left that more intact, and I'd be interested to know which one do you prefer more? Okay, so next up, we're going to see how the CampSnap does with some nighttime street photography. And so the first place I decided to shoot was the Albion Hotel, right where we've been staying. First one I got was with the xenon flash on, which gives it that warmer yellowish coloration. And then I took one without the flash, which gave it a cooler, cleaner look, if darker, but I actually like that better. Because of course you could always brighten it up and lift shadows in post-processing like I did here. And I actually think it turned out pretty decent. Next up, we moved on up the street to Captain Harry's, where again I took one with and without the flash. In this case, with turned out better. And at the time what I said was this. You know, I guess one of the things that makes this interesting is I really have no idea how these shots are going to turn out until I get back home. That's supposed to be part of the charm, but I guess also part of the challenge. I'm not really sure if I liked it. I mean, when I was putting this video together, I heard of this term called chimping, which is the practice of constantly checking the photos on your LCD screen every time you take one. And I mean, that might not be ideal, but there's got to be some kind of happy medium between constantly checking your photos and not having any ability to check them at all, which of course can complicate your ability to produce the results that you want. And so then on I went to the yogurt stand, which is a photo opportunity I saw the year before, but I didn't have my camera with me. I didn't have time to go get it and then take it, so I wanted to try and recreate that scene. And it ended up looking like this straight out of camera, but with a little post-processing editing magic, we got it looking like this, which was a little better. But now we'll go to day 2 for the final test, daytime street photography. And I think the main thing of interest I could add from here is the filter test I did using the different available filters on the dial here. And so what I think I got was the standard, the vintage 1, and the vintage 2, but I kind of like vintage 1 the best in this case because of its postcard-like quality. And I have to say, I think that was the filter because as far as I can tell, the metadata isn't telling us which filter was on for which photo. So let's talk about the verdict. What and who is the Camp Snap for? Well, personally, I wouldn't use the Camp Snap as my main camera. If you're somewhere where you're never going to be again, or if you're photographing an important event, you're documenting something that's not going to be repeated, or anything where you're trying to produce a particular result, there's just too much uncertainty. It's not the right camera for that. I mean, I'm all for simplicity, which is why I like digicams, but this just took too far for me. That said, I think there are some use cases where I could see the Camp Snap Pro being a fun option. Like if you're doing a low-stakes photo walk in your own neighborhood or a nearby town, then here the uncertainty factor becomes more fun than stressful. I could also see it being good for taking casual, fun photos at parties or other social gatherings where spontaneity or imperfections in the framing might be part of the charm. This is actually how I think you could get the most out of it. Put it in the bag alongside your regular gear and use it as a supplementary camera. Pull it out when the moment seems right or when you actually do just want to have more of a low stress, screen-free kind of experience. So at the end of the day, the Camp Snap didn't convince me that screens and camera controls were a bad thing. In fact, they kind of reminded me why those things exist. But it also reminded me that photography doesn't always have to be optimized. Maybe it's good to put the screen away sometime and just focus on the fun of being there in the moment. Sometimes there's something to be said about just taking the photo, moving on, and not knowing what you got until you got home. It is a bit like unwrapping a present. And so for me, that's when the Camp Snap Pro works best, when that uncertainty is part of the fun, and not so much when getting the shot really matters. I hope you found this review helpful, and if you're really passionate about photography, check out the growing collection of photography-themed shirts and hats in the merch store. Links in the description below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.